3 days before surgeons were scheduled to remove the tumor from my chest, my husband canceled my health insurance. He did not hide behind a telephone call or ask an assistant to handle it. He came to St. Catherine's Medical Center in Portland, stood beside me at the admissions counter, and waited until the receptionist confirmed the cancellation. Then he leaned close enough for his breath to touch my ear. "Perhaps now you'll understand that I'm not paying for every crisis you invent." He delivered the sentence softly, almost lovingly. From a distance, anyone watching might have mistaken his cruelty for comfort. My husband, Julian Mercer, cared deeply about appearances. He straightened his navy tie, glanced at his reflection in the glass entrance, and walked away without asking what would happen to me. He believed he had finally made me helpless. What Julian did not know was that I had already made 2 telephone calls that morning. Neither had been to an insurance company. My name is Helena Cross. I was 43 years old, and before the end of that week, the most important client Julian had ever won would discover exactly who his supposedly dependent wife really was. The receptionist stared at her screen, visibly embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Mercer. Your policy was terminated at 6:12 this morning. The cancellation is effective immediately." Behind her, a red notice flashed beside my patient number. "Coverage inactive," Julian smiled, as though the computer had confirmed a restaurant reservation. "There's no administrative error," he said. "I canceled it personally." The receptionist looked between us. "Sir, Mrs. Mercer is scheduled for cancer surgery on Thursday." "I'm aware." A nurse arranging files near the doorway stopped moving. Julian's phone illuminated in his hand. A message from someone named Sabine appeared before he turned the screen downward. I had known about Sabine for 4 months. I knew she worked at his branding agency. I knew he had rented an apartment for her across the river. I knew he had promised her that our marriage was practically finished and that I would leave quietly because I had nowhere else to go. He was correct about only one thing: our marriage was finished. Julian leaned toward me and whispered his accusation about my invented crises. He waited for tears, pleading, or public humiliation. When none came, irritation tightened his mouth. I studied the clock above the reception desk, 8:17. "Drive carefully," I said. The elevator doors closed behind him. The nurse who had been watching approached me. Her badge identified her as Marisol Vega. "I heard everything," she said. "Would you like me to call a relative?" "No, thank you. I've already called the people I need." She glanced at the telephone in my hand. Perhaps she expected to see an insurer, a frightened sibling, or an emergency loan company in my recent calls. The names displayed were Miriam Shaw and Elias Grant. Marisol did not recognize them. Julian would have. Miriam had been my attorney for 19 years. Elias managed an organization called the North Star Trust, though only 4 living people knew I had established it. I stepped away from the desk and called Miriam again. When she answered, I gave her one instruction: file everything. To understand why I remained calm, you need to understand the woman I had been before I met Julian and why I allowed her to disappear. At 26, I founded Crossway Patient Solutions in a rented room above a bakery in Seattle. Hospitals hired us to challenge wrongful insurance denials involving complex surgeries, chemotherapy, and rare disease treatments. I learned the healthcare system the way a locksmith learns the inside of a lock. I knew which codes triggered automatic rejections, which documents forced reconsideration, and which legal phrases could turn a refusal into an approval. Within 8 years, Crossway employed 300 people. At 35, I sold it for an amount large enough to make work optional for the rest of my life. Newspapers called me brilliant, relentless, and intimidating. Investors invited me everywhere. Strangers who had ignored my emails suddenly wanted photographs with me. Then my business partner tried to steal the company before the sale closed. He forged board documents, courted investors behind my back, and told reporters that my judgment had become unstable. I survived because Miriam uncovered the fraud in time, but the experience changed me. Was no longer felt like recognition. It felt like exposure. After the sale, I vanished from business magazines and created the North Star Trust anonymously. The trust paid for cancer treatments when insurance appeals failed or moved too slowly. We did not lend money. We did not negotiate payment plans. We paid the bill so frightened families could concentrate on survival instead of bankruptcy. The first person we helped was a single father whose leukemia medication had been rejected because a physician entered one number incorrectly. The trust covered his treatment within 24 hours. He lived long enough to attend both daughters' graduations. His first thank you letter was addressed simply to the stranger who gave me more time. I kept it. For 14 years, North Star quietly financed surgeries, medication, transportation, housing, and hospice support. Elias ran its daily operations. Public documents identified a legal holding company as the principal donor. My name appeared nowhere. When I met Julian at a museum fundraiser in Portland, he knew I had once worked in healthcare consulting. I never told him how successfully. At first, his confidence entertained me. He was building Mercer and Vail, a struggling advertising agency with 5 employees and more ambition than revenue. He spoke about campaigns as though he were directing history. He made me laugh. More importantly, he never asked me for an introduction or investment, at least, not then. We married 2 years later. Gradually, my privacy became his preferred story about me. He told friends I had left an ordinary administrative career because I was not suited to pressure. He introduced me as someone who handled the home side of things. Every correction seemed likely to create a larger argument, so I stopped correcting him. I told myself silence protected my peace. In reality, it protected his pride. Julian's mother, Lorraine, reinforced his assumptions. At one Christmas dinner, she squeezed my hand and said, "Julian gave you such a secure life. Not every woman without accomplishments gets that opportunity." I replied, "Security can be surprisingly deceptive." She smiled because she did not understand me. Neither did her son. As Julian's agency grew, his contempt became less subtle. The house was his because he selected it. The cars were his because his accountant paid the invoices from our visible joint account. Even my medical treatment became, in his language, something he was providing. He never wondered where the original down payment for our house had come from. He never examined the trust that owned the investment account securing his earliest business loan. Most importantly, he never learned who recommended Mercer and Vail to Northwest Medical Alliance, the hospital network whose account transformed his tiny agency into a prestigious regional firm. I had made that recommendation. I believed in him then. I wanted him to succeed without feeling that success had been purchased by his wife. So I made one private call to the hospital board chair and never mentioned it again. Julian built his career on that open door, then spent years boasting that nobody had ever opened a door for him. On the morning he canceled my insurance, Miriam answered my first call at 6:30. "Are you certain?" she asked. "Once I file for divorce and activate the financial protections, he'll know there are assets he has never seen." "I'm certain." "What about Thursday's surgery?" "I can pay for it." The uninsured estimate was $179,000. That sum would have terrified the woman Julian believed I was. It did not threaten the woman I had hidden. "I can challenge the cancellation today," Miriam said. "The policy should be restored before surgery." "No, Helena. Reversing the cancellation solves the medical problem. I need to solve the life that allowed him to think he could do this." There was a pause. Then Miriam said, "I'll file by noon." My second call was to Elias. For 14 years, he had defended my anonymity even when revealing the trust's founder would have attracted more donations. "I want my name disclosed at the North Star benefit," I told him. The annual benefit was being held the following Saturday at Northwest Medical Alliance's new oncology center. The trust had donated $14 million toward its construction. Mercer and Vail was producing the event. Elias understood the significance immediately. "Julian doesn't know who the principal donor is?" "No. And his own agency is arranging the reveal?" "Yes." "Do you want the hospital to terminate his contract?" "I haven't decided. For now. Prepare the founding charter, donation records, and original correspondence. You've spent 14 years avoiding that stage. I spent 11 years disappearing inside my marriage. I'm finished with both." The night before surgery, St. Catherine's placed me in a room with Dorothy Ames, a retired librarian in her late 60s. Pictures of 3 grandchildren covered her bedside table. She noticed I was alone but never asked why. Instead, she offered me a peppermint and told me terrible jokes until I laughed. Later, while darkness gathered beyond the window, she mentioned that she had survived ovarian cancer 7 years earlier. "My insurer rejected the treatment," she said. "Then some charitable trust paid everything. North Star, I think it was called. I never discovered who created it." My breath caught. Dorothy continued turning her wedding ring around her finger. "I send them a card every Christmas. Silly, perhaps. But somebody gave me 7 extra years. My youngest granddaughter knows me because of that stranger." "It isn't silly," I said. "Whoever founded it must be extraordinary. Or perhaps they simply knew how frightening a hospital bill could be." Dorothy studied me for a moment, but then Marisol entered to check our charts. She adjusted my blanket and asked whether anyone would come in the morning. No. Her expression hardened slightly, though her hands remained gentle. What your husband did downstairs does not define what happens in this room, she said. Here, you're a patient worthy of care. Nothing else matters. Before leaving, she checked the computer and frowned. That's unexpected. What is? Your entire balance was paid this afternoon. The donor requested anonymity. I almost smiled. Elias followed instructions efficiently. It seems you have a guardian angel, Marisol said. Something like that. The surgery lasted 4 hours. When I woke, sunlight lay across the recovery room wall. Pain pressed heavily beneath my bandages, but the surgeon's expression told me what mattered. The procedure went perfectly, she said. We removed the entire tumor. The margins appear clear. I closed my eyes and exhaled. On my telephone, Miriam had left a message. Divorce petition filed. Protective orders approved. Julian had sent 6 messages. The first demanded to know how I had paid the hospital. The second warned me not to embarrass him. By the 6th, he had become almost polite. We need to discuss this rationally. I answered none of them. During my recovery, Julian tried to control the story. He told friends that stress had made me unpredictable. He told Lorraine I had hidden money from him. He told his colleagues our separation was mutual. Then Miriam's legal notices reached his office. The house he called his was owned by a premarital trust. The collateral supporting his company's original credit facility belonged to that same trust. Our joint account contained only the household funds we had mutually contributed. My remaining assets were legally separate, carefully documented, and established years before our marriage. Julian had not been financing me. If anything, I had quietly insulated him from failure. His attorney apparently asked him, "Who exactly did you marry?" Julian could not answer. Meanwhile, he threw himself into planning the North Star benefit. Northwest Medical Alliance's Oncology Center was his largest campaign, and the gala was meant to restore confidence following rumors about his divorce. He supervised the stage, lighting, films, invitations, and donor presentation. The hospital board insisted that the founder's identity remain confidential until the live announcement. Julian complained, but the confidentiality clause was absolute. The entire event depends on this person, he told board chair Camille Rhodes. I should at least know whether it's a man or woman. You'll learn with the other guests, Camille replied. He brought Sabine as his date, according to a colleague who later described the conversation. Julian told her that arriving together would demonstrate that he had moved forward. He considered people parts of a campaign. A wife conveyed stability, a mistress conveyed desirability, and a hospital contract conveyed importance. He never understood that real character exists after the picture is removed. My invitation arrived on thick cream paper. Helena Crossfunder and Gast of Honor for several minutes. I traced the raised lettering. Seeing my name frightened me more than I expected. Remaining hidden had become instinctive. Stepping forward meant surrendering control over how strangers might use my history. But I had finally realized that hiding power could become another form of surrender if it required hiding myself. Elias visited with a leather portfolio containing the trust's original charter, audited donations, patient outcomes, and the agreement for the oncology center. You can still change your mind, he said. No, Julian will be there. That's precisely why I won't. The gala filled the Grand Hawthorne Hotel with physicians, donors, executives, nurses, and former patients. Julian entered through the main doors with Sabine beside him in a silver dress. Photographers immediately turned toward them. I entered through a side corridor wearing dark green. I had not chosen the dress to command attention. I had spent too much of my life reacting to other people's expectations. That night I wanted simply to feel like myself. Julian saw me before I reached my table. His expression moved from confusion to anger. He crossed the ballroom quickly, leaving Sabine behind. What are you doing here? I was invited. This is not the place for whatever performance Miriam has planned. No performance. He lowered his voice. You're recovering from surgery. People will understand if you leave. The old Helena might have heard concern in the sentence because she desperately wanted to. I heard the instruction beneath it. You no longer decide where I belong. He signaled to a young event coordinator. This woman is not supposed to be inside, he said. Please escort her out discreetly. The coordinator checked her tablet. Then she looked at me, looked back at Julian, and swallowed. Mr. Mercer, Mrs. Cross is listed as the principal guest. That's impossible. She has the founder's credentials. Check again. I already have. The ballroom lights dimmed. Julian remained beside me as Camille walked to the podium. The enormous North Star emblem glowed on the screen behind her, an image his own agency had designed. 14 years ago, Camille began, an anonymous donor made a promise. No cancer patient should lose the chance to live because an insurer, employer, or bank decided that treatment cost too much. The room became silent. That promise became the North Star Trust. Since its establishment, the trust has supported more than 18,000 patients and their families. It financed medication, surgeries, transportation, temporary housing, and the oncology center we celebrate tonight. Camille opened a sealed envelope. Julian stared at the stage. For years, our benefactor refused public recognition. Tonight, she has agreed to let us thank her. I felt his attention shift toward me. The founder of the North Star Trust is Helena Cross. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then Dorothy stood at a table near the stage. Marisol, invited as one of the evening's honored oncology nurses, rose beside her. The rest of the ballroom followed. Applause surrounded me so suddenly that I could feel it through the floor. Doctors, trustees, patients, and donors turned in my direction. Julian did not move. His agency had built the stage, focused the lights, printed the program, and rehearsed the announcement. Without realizing it, he had constructed the setting in which the wife he erased would become visible. Camille came down from the platform and embraced me. "You made this center possible," she said. "Thousands of families will walk through its doors because of you." Julian finally found his voice. "Helena, we need to speak privately." "No," Camille said. "I believe privacy has protected you quite enough." Several board members turned toward him. Camille continued. "There is another fact you may not know. 12 years ago, when Mercer and Vail applied for our communications account, the selection committee intended to reject your proposal." Julian's face changed. "A respected healthcare entrepreneur called me personally," she said. "She guaranteed your integrity and asked us to give your new agency an opportunity." He looked at me. "No, yes," Camille replied. "Helena's recommendation got your company through our door. I earned that account." "You earned the work that followed," I said. "But someone opened the first door. You simply never cared enough to ask who." The framed hospital logo occupied the center of Julian's famous office display. He called it the account that made him. Now everyone knew whose word had made the account possible. Marisol stepped forward. "I also need to say something." Her calm voice carried farther than shouting would have. "I was present at St. Catherine's when Mr. Mercer confirmed that he had deliberately canceled his wife's medical coverage 3 days before cancer surgery." A board member stared at Julian. "You canceled her coverage?" "He leaned toward her," Marisol continued, "and said he would no longer pay for crises she invented. I documented the time and exact language in my nursing notes." "That was a private marital matter," Julian said. "You made it public when you said it at my admissions desks." Sabine stood several feet behind him. Her confident expression had disappeared. She removed her hand from the back of his chair. "You told me the insurance issue was an accounting misunderstanding," she said. Julian turned sharply. "Not now. You also told me she had never worked." Sabine. She walked toward the exit. Lorraine, seated near the stage, looked as though someone had taken language away from her. A woman beside her whispered, not quite quietly enough, "Isn't Helena the one you said had accomplished nothing?" Julian approached me again. "I made a mistake. A mistake is forgetting an appointment. You made a decision." I was angry. "You drove to a cancer hospital to watch the consequences." His eyes moved around the room, measuring what remained of his reputation. "So this is revenge?" "No. Revenge would require me to destroy something. I'm only refusing to hide the truth that already exists." I turned to Camille. "Northwest Medical Alliance should review its relationship with Mercer and Vail according to its normal standards. My donation will not be used to demand retaliation." Julian blinked, surprised. I continued, "Patients should not lose a valuable campaign because of my marriage, but neither should anyone protect him from professional consequences he created himself." That distinction mattered to me. For years, I had confused kindness with self-erasure. I no longer intended to make that mistake. Mercy did not require lying, and dignity did not require cruelty. I faced Julian one final time. "I'm not taking your career, your company, or your money. I'm simply withdrawing the invisible support you mistook for your own strength." Then I returned to the stage. Before speaking, I found Dorothy in the audience. She was crying openly now. This trust was never meant to celebrate one founder, I said. It exists because illness already takes enough from people. A medical diagnosis should not also take their home, education, savings, or dignity. I spoke about nurses like Marisol, who remembered facts when frightened patients could not. I spoke about families choosing between medication and rent. I spoke about the difference between charity that seeks applause and help that arrives before despair. When I finished, Dorothy met me beside the stage. "It was you," she whispered. "All these years. My Christmas cards were going to you." They reached the trust. She took my hands. "You gave me my grandchildren." "No," I said. "Your doctors and your own courage gave you those years. We only removed the bill standing in the way. That isn't a small thing." She was right. Sometimes removing one obstacle changes the entire direction of a life. The hospital board ended Mercer and Vale's contract 2 months later, not because I requested it, but because an internal review uncovered fabricated expense records, improper payments, and Julian's relationship with Sabine, whom he had promoted without disclosure. Several clients left after the findings became public. Julian blamed me in the beginning. Then he blamed Sabine, his finance director, the hospital board, and the economy. He blamed everyone except the man who had made the decisions. The divorce was completed quietly. Julian received everything legally belonging to him. I kept what had always been mine. Lorraine sent one letter saying that families should forgive mistakes. I returned it unopened. My follow-up scans were clear. I began leading North Star publicly, though I refused to place my personal name on the oncology center. The bronze plaque in its entrance reads, "The North Star Center for Every Life Worth Fighting for." Marisol attended the opening. So did Dorothy, accompanied by all 3 grandchildren. Elias stood at the back, smiling like a man relieved that a ghost had finally decided to become human again. In my office, I keep the old business card from Crossway Patient Solutions. On the back is a sentence I wrote during the battle to save my first company. "Never ask another person for permission to matter." I had forgotten those words. Julian's cruelty forced me to read them again, but I no longer consider that a gift from him. Taking credit for another person's awakening is simply another way of claiming ownership over their life. I awakened because I was ready. People sometimes ask whether I regret hiding the truth from my husband. I regret hiding myself from me. Privacy protected my wealth, but silence slowly surrendered my identity. Each time Julian diminished me and I said nothing, I helped maintain a picture that was convenient for him and devastating for me. That is not peace, it is disappearance. I did not recover the woman I had been before my marriage. She belonged to an earlier life and carried different fears. Instead, I became someone new, a woman who could remain generous without becoming invisible, forgive without returning, and stand in the light without apologizing for the shadow she cast. Julian spent 11 years calculating my worth. In the end, his greatest mistake was not that he calculated incorrectly. It was believing the calculation had ever been his to make.